So, one thing I think we can all safely expect for the Nintendo Switch 2 is a very strong and steady stream of first-party Nintendo games and franchises and IPs releasing on the console throughout its entire life. But what about third parties? Will third-party titles and multi-platform titles play a significant role in the Switch 2's overall library? I personally think that it will, which is a very exciting prospect, as somebody who obviously loves Nintendo's first-party content, but very much loves several third-party franchises and multi-platform titles out there as well. And we've seen Nintendo have ebbs and flows and ups and downs with their third-party support over the years and decades and generations. It obviously became very, very strong in the Switch era, and I personally see no reason why that won't continue in the Switch 2 era. Something that isn't a surprise to anyone is just how well Nintendo has managed to survive and even thrive, relying almost entirely on their first-party content. There is no other company in the business now, or ever really, that has been able to make such a significant impact and be so crazy successful relying on their franchises. But when the franchises you own includes Mario and Zelda and Pokemon and Metroid, which isn't the huge seller, I know, but look, it's a very popular franchise that's known for great quality and one of the oldest franchises still running in the entire gaming industry, and several others we know that fall under the Nintendo banner. It makes sense that you can rely so heavily on that library of exclusive IP and become as successful as they have been. But as we creep ever closer to the April 2nd Nintendo Direct, which means we're also creeping ever closer to the eventual release date of the Switch 2, which we don't know now, but one thing we do know is every day is one day closer to that release. I think it's kind of important and interesting to look at what might be happening with the third-party and multi-platform situation on the Nintendo Switch, because I think there is a great chance that even this April 2nd Nintendo Direct will probably feature some third-party content and information about other companies who might be supporting the platform. I mentioned this on a recent video, but even the January 2017 Japan stage event for the Nintendo Switch also featured some folks from other companies like Sega and EA on stage talking about their dedication to supporting the Switch 2. In fact, this even happened for the Wii U. People like to forget this stuff and block it out of their memory because they're very unfair to the Wii U, in my personal opinion. But this also happened for the Wii U. It happened even stronger for the Switch, and of course, because the Switch became so crazy successful, then obviously that panned out much better for a lot of these third-party companies. So one thing I want to do real quickly is go over 6 titles or franchises that I actually think will be very, very important to see come to the Nintendo Switch 2. I think that some of these titles have better chances than others. There's one that I think a lot of people will think has no shot at coming to the Switch 2. I don't agree with that, but obviously time will tell when it comes to that stuff. But let's go over a couple of franchises that, again, I think are important to come to the Switch 2, and to varying levels, I think, might. So I'm going to start off strong with what's my personal favorite of all 6 being listed here, and that is Monster Hunter. And look, man, going back to the Nintendo Wii, Monster Hunter has had a very, very strong presence on Nintendo platforms. Monster Hunter Tri was an exclusive title for the Nintendo Wii, which I purchased and owned, and I loved it. That got me into the franchise. Then it went on to be supported on the Wii U. Obviously, the DS and 3DS got a ton of support as well. And the Switch with Monster Hunter Rise that initially launched as an exclusive to the Nintendo Switch. So Monster Hunter is a mammoth franchise. It is one of my all-time favorite franchises, and Monster Hunter Wilds is like 2 weeks away. So we're in a very exciting time for the franchise, and with Nintendo having the Switch 2 coming soon, would we be looking at a scenario where Monster Hunter Wilds specifically comes to the Switch 2? We do not know. Although, in the last day or two, some folks from Capcom did come out and address this and said that they're not ruling out the possibility of Monster Hunter Wilds coming to the Switch 2, but that's obviously not a confirmation either. So it could be a situation where sometime after the Switch 2 releases, they port Monster Hunter Wilds to it, or maybe sometime down the road, they make another new Switch 2 exclusive game the same way they did initially with Rise, before it eventually went multi-platform. Final Fantasy is another very important franchise to talk about, and I think one that most of us would agree has a pretty darn good shot of coming to the Switch 2 in a variety of fashions, whether it's porting prior games or whether it's bringing the next main Final Fantasy game, which would be, Final Fantasy 17, right? Maybe there's a chance that both of those things are going to happen. Maybe they bring over Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Remake and Rebirth, and also do Final Fantasy 17. Or maybe they do some other weird spin-off game. Final Fantasy is not my franchise. I'm not a JRPG guy. I've dabbled in the series. I own and have played most of Final Fantasy 16, and admittedly, I love that game. Final Fantasy VII Remake frustrated me, but I did play it all the way through. Rebirth, I bought and started it and got really bored and frustrated with it and gave up. So that's just me, but I'm the odd one out here. Most people love Final Fantasy, and I understand why. It's an old, classic, very popular franchise. And I think that nowadays, with the Switch 2 coming and the popularity of the Nintendo brand, I think it would be pretty crazy for Final Fantasy to not come to the Switch 2. So personally, I think that that's going to happen. Let's talk about the highest profile title on my list here, which is Grand Theft Auto 6. Now, it should be known, I am not a Grand Theft Auto guy. I'm not a fan of the franchise. It doesn't appeal to me. There is nothing wrong with it. I know why it's popular, and it's so extremely successful that it's always important to consider its impact in gaming. And I even remember Grand Theft Auto 3 on the PlayStation 2, man. I was around working for GameStop as like a third key manager at the time that GTA 3 and Vice City released on the PS2. I remember the revolutions that were those games. Like, they made a huge impact in gaming. So I will always respect and appreciate it simply for the 6th-gen era of Grand Theft Auto. GTA 6 might be the biggest game across all of gaming for the next 10 years once it eventually releases, if it sticks to 2025. And I know there's debate on whether or not the Switch 2 would be able to run Grand Theft Auto 6. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say, even though we don't know the final specs for the Switch, and I'm also not smart enough to know what those specs would mean anyway, I feel like Rockstar and the folks behind Grand Theft Auto 6, if they wanted to take advantage of the huge support and install base the Switch 2 will gather, they could probably make a pretty competent version of that game work on the Switch 2. I just personally believe that. Time will tell if I'm right or wrong. But I think it's a game worth considering. It might have not the best shot of coming to Switch 2, but I think it's possible. And I think it would be great for both parties. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Probably the title most often discussed as coming to the Switch 2 would be Elden Ring. And yeah, look, man, Elden Ring makes a hell of a lot of sense. And I love Elden Ring. I am a Dark Souls guy and Demon Souls guy and a From Software guy, so the Souls games and Bloodborne and Elden Ring are all fantastic. And even though it would be a fairly old game, I think I want to say 2 or 3 years old. God, when did that come out? 2022 or 23? I can't remember now. Either way, it would be, 2 or 3 years old by the time it would release if it came out on the Switch 2 this year. But it is the kind of title that just makes sense to be a delayed port to a brand new console. So if From Software is smart, if Nintendo is smart, if they are talking and working things out together, I think it would be great to see this happen. I mean, Dark Souls Remastered did come to the Nintendo Switch. I own a copy of that, and it was great. The sound design had some compression issues, but in general, it was a great port, and I really, really loved it. So Elden Ring is one of those titles that makes a lot of sense. It's so crazy popular. It would be a huge win for the Switch 2 to have this title available, especially early on in the life of the Switch 2, because the game itself is already out and already old. So there's a lot of reasons why I think that this will probably happen. Now let's talk about the sure thing, which is Call of Duty. We know between the Activision Blizzard purchase from Microsoft and all of the documents that had to get sent out to the public due to the litigation case, and then beyond even that, the fact that it was actually confirmed that Activision and the Call of Duty franchise are committed to supporting Nintendo platforms for 10 years, I'm just going to say it's a 100% certainty that 2025's Call of Duty game will be coming to the Switch 2, and just like any of these titles I'm talking about, that's going to be a huge win. It's the most popular franchise in gaming right now. Whether you like it or not is not the point. It's incredibly successful, incredibly popular, and I know that nowadays people who are subscribed to Game Pass can just download and play the new Call of Duty games for their monthly Game Pass price, But Switch players are a different breed, I think. Nintendo players are a different breed. And I think that whether or not they have Game Pass, a lot of Nintendo fans are the kind of folks, and I'm one of these in many cases, who will say, I'd rather buy and support it on the Switch 2 because it's just more exciting, and it's great to see it finally come to a Nintendo platform. So this is just worth mentioning because of just the titanic size and success of Call of Duty, and the fact that we all but know it's going to be coming to the Switch 2. It'll be the first Call of Duty game coming to Nintendo within this 10-year deal, and I think it's going to be super exciting. And then, of course, let's talk about Doom real quick. This is the other title alongside Monster Hunter that just gets my juices flowing, because I love Monster Hunter, and I love Doom. And Doom the Dark Ages comes out this year in May, and I feel like this has a fantastic shot of coming to the Switch 2. And I know some people might want to poo-poo the idea because, oh, it's too powerful, it's too fast, it's too graphically intensive, the Switch 2 won't be able to handle it, it's going to light on fire, blah, 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 blah. And I just don't buy that. I mean, Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal managed to come to the Switch, the original Switch. Yes, the frame rates and the resolution and all that stuff is toned down, of course. But the fact that they were able to make them work competently on the Switch says everything you need to know. Now there's going to be a more powerful Switch too? Yes, they'll still have to tone down Doom the Dark Ages a bit to run on that, I'm sure, but the level of toning down, I can only imagine, will be much less severe than anything they had to do for the original Switch. And I think that there's a great relationship right now with the Doom franchise and Nintendo and the Switch platforms. So there's myriad reasons why I feel pretty confident saying this one is very likely going to happen. I'm not going to call it a lock, but I think it has the next best chance of any game on this list behind probably Elden Ring. So those are just some example franchises that come to mind that I think make a lot of sense for the Switch 2 and for Nintendo going forward. And like I said, have varying levels of happening. I think GTA 6 is probably at the bottom of that list. Call of Duty is at the top simply because it's basically confirmed. And right behind that, again, I would probably put Elden Ring. So it'll be an exciting time going into the Switch 2, and even, like I said, this April Direct, to see what Nintendo and the rest of the industry and these third-party developers have planned for the Nintendo Switch 2. One element that I think is really important to touch on here, though, when we talk about the Switch 2 and its relationship with third-party developers and these games and franchises going forward, is something that I think the Switch 2 really needs to solve, an issue that persisted in the Switch era, is not getting a lot of third-party multi-platform games day and date. A lot of us have talked about this before, and it's very, very frustrating to me that that has persisted for so long, especially in the Switch era where the Switch was so popular. And I think that a lot of Switch-specific sales were probably missed out on by not releasing them same day and date on the Switch. Some titles did, like the Mortal Kombat games are the ones that come to mind immediately, and I know that there are plenty others, so forgive me, that's just one that popped in my brain. But there are certainly some fairly high-profile third-party multi-platform games that release day and date on the Switch alongside of the other platforms, but a lot of them also didn't. In fact, I think it's fair to say most of them didn't. So in the Switch 2 era, where the Switch 2 will have several years overlap with the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, where the power differential is much, much smaller, I think we need games like Call of Duty. I have to think about games that would release after the fact. So future Call of Duty games, Grand Theft Auto 6, maybe From Software's next game, anything from Capcom, the next Street Fighter game, the next Resident Evil game, which I'm sure is going to be announced sometime soon. All of this stuff, they need to get to a point where these companies feel comfortable releasing their games day and date on the Switch 2 with the other platforms and believing that it has a real shot at seeing some sales success. And it'll be up to a lot of the Switch 2 gamers to show these companies that they're willing to buy and support these games on the Switch 2 as their platform of choice. And I think that's going to happen. So that's part of what also excites me about this prospect. I mean, the Switch 2, I don't expect it to be as successful as the current Switch, but I still think it's going to be hugely successful. And I think that the number of gamers and Nintendo fans that will be supporting or preferring to support a lot of these third-party games on the Switch 2 is going to be very high. Again, Monster Hunter Wilds is another game, or the Monster Hunter franchise, that to me probably speaks volumes to that. So I just want to know that these companies will see value in that. And, I think part of what we'll have to learn is if in how they develop multi-platform games to the Switch 2, can they keep their A team internally, the one that's developing the game for PC, PlayStation, and Xbox? Can that same team also develop this game for the Switch 2? Or will they need to get a B team or a port studio to bring these games over to Switch 2? So I think that when a developer needs a B team or a port studio to bring a game to the Switch platform, that's probably where we see a lot of delayed releases, because it just probably takes more time with a different team to tailor that game to the Switch hardware. If the Switch 2 is able to eliminate a lot of that disparity, then I think if these companies, like Capcom and Square and Rockstar and whatnot, From Software, if they can keep their same A team that's working on any given platform and develop for all platforms, Switch 2 included at the same time, that's probably where we'll see the day and date parity happen. So, as with most things, time will tell. We don't know, but I wanted to bring that up in this conversation, just how important I think that will be for third-party success on the Switch 2 going forward. And so again, none of this is to take away from the fact that Nintendo has proven themselves as a company that can survive and thrive, like I said in the intro, on their exclusive content, because they have so many exclusive IPs that are so popular and sell so well and are of such high quality. It honestly puts the rest of the industry to shame. We've seen Sony and Microsoft, who I both love. I love my PS5 and I like my Series X, and I'm always wanting and buying more games for them whenever it makes sense to. We've seen them struggle with how they're approaching their own first-party and exclusive IPs and franchises. Sony has been doing a little bit better over the last few years than Microsoft has, but obviously Sony's first-party studios have been quiet for a long time as well, so it's tricky. And now Microsoft has taken their best stuff and thrown it all over the place like they don't even value it anymore, so it's all very messy. But Nintendo, man, they just have that magic. They've got that quality, and they've got that IP library that simply can't be touched. But that being said, again, the point of this conversation was to say, even though they can survive on their first-party outings, it's only going to be a good thing if they can continue to garner great third-party support, get some of these biggest multi-platform titles over to the Switch 2, and also, as I said, get them released same day and date with their counterparts. So these are my thoughts. Tell me what you expect for third-party support on the Switch 2 below, and I will see you next time.